So, having spoken about the evolution of James Bond, and also thinking about what James Bond has kind of ended up becoming with this Daniel Craig era, what do you think are like the core aspects of James Bond? Like, what are those like identifiers or adjectives that make you realize and understand that this character is James Bond? Because obviously, Daniel Craig's James Bond is very different to Pierce Brosnan's James Bond, and they're just one generation of James Bond apart. So I just wonder what those core aspects are that allow you to know that this is James Bond, or is it just literally the film being called James Bond, you know?
Actually, relatedly, this makes me think of something I was reading earlier. Apparently, the author, Ian Fleming, like who wrote the original James Bond story, when they were casting the first James Bond, who was Sean Connery, he was really not happy with that casting. He thought that he was not at all the right person for the role, and apparently he like won him over time, and his kind of like charisma like really worked.
Because Sean Connery is like the most charismatic, of course. Just like shines on screen.
And it's funny because I think a lot of people feel like even though he was the original, he was still, or maybe because he was the original, he is like James Bond to them. He is like the iconic, and he is the only James Bond. But like to think that the person who like actually invented James Bond was not on board at the beginning is kind of funny, and just speaks to how like interpretive characters are and how we understand people differently from book to film. And we all sort of have our own ideas of who characters are. So it's interesting talking about like who I think James Bond is as a person. I see him as very like suave and classy. Like he's very smooth. And he just like knows, part of this is just like the action figure in general, but he's always able to like get out of tight situations, whatever it is. If he's like about to die or about to drown, he's like in a ship, he's always able to get out, no matter like how dire the consequences are, or like if it looks like he's not going to be able to. And I see this in Mission Impossible as well, because particularly I'm thinking of one scene in one of the films where like he's like underwater, and he only has like 10 seconds before there's going to be an explosion, and he can't hold his breath long enough, but of course he survives. Like I think part of this is just like the action hero needing to get out of whatever kind of scrapes they get into. But James Bond, just like his classiness, I think is a huge part of who he is as a person. Like just able to sort of fit into whatever situation he's in, and get along with people. Yeah, I don't know. What about you?
Yeah, randomly, out of all the action heroes, like Ethan Hunt from Mission Impossible, Jason Bourne from the Bourne series, I oddly do feel like classiness, and related to that is that James Bond needs to look good in a suit. And I'm not saying that Tom Cruise and Matt Damon don't look good in suits. Like, obviously, they look great because they are amazing actors and look beautiful, but I think that James Bond, like, that is a requirement. And that's so superficial, but that says a lot about the classiness which you were alluding to. I also just feel like he's charismatic. Like, he's suave, but he's not, like, talkative. He doesn't need to be the chattiest person out there. It's just that, like, kind of nuanced way of speaking, or when he's kind of talking to people. And obviously it's the way that it's shot as well, those close-ups to the face, and like kind of those like eyes piercing into your soul, that sort of thing. Like you kind of feel like there's always something unspoken with whatever he's saying, and somehow the message is also spoken across, like the other person's also like saying something subtly. And I feel like that's just not the case with Ethan Hunt or Jason Bourne. Like, there is an intelligence that is more classy. Yeah, I think that is the word. But I guess, like, if you had this kind of fight, this one-on-one, like, Ethan Hunt versus James Bond, I still kind
oh my god.
I still kind of feel like they'd even out in terms of, like, brute strength and intelligence of, like, problem solving. Although, if I were in a deserted island, I'd probably want Ethan Hunt next to me rather than James Bond. I don't need a suave person. I feel like that would just get on my nerves. I just want someone to solve problems.
That's so funny to think about all of those characters, like, fighting together, because in each of their films, like, they are the best, right? Like, they always win the fight. They're always, like, the fastest, the strongest, whatever it is. So what happens when you put them against each other? Like, they can't lose. None of them can lose.
Yeah.
That's funny.
That's true.
And also your point about him wearing a suit. Like, yeah, why is he always wearing a suit? Like, he's not the only one who works for, like, the, you know, CIA or, like, governmental spy agency, whatever you want to refer to as, like, what they work for.
Yeah.
And yet Bond is, like, just always wearing a suit.
And looks great. Like, looks so good in a suit. And you've seen Tom Cruise in a suit in Mission Impossible. You've seen that, but it's not a requirement.
It's not the same. Yeah.
In fact, the requirement for Ethan Hunt is oddly these, like, black, like, you know, the vest and then, like, a black skin tight suit. Like, somehow that's more the requirement for Ethan Hunt and less so for James Bond.
When you think of each of these characters, where do you see them? Because when I'm picturing Ethan Hunt, I see him on a motorcycle.
Oh.
Like, wearing a full black on a motorcycle, like, zooming down the street. Whereas when I think of James Bond, I see him just, like, wearing a suit and, like, slowly walking somewhere.
Oh, interesting. Whereas
they're, like, neutral.
I think I see James Bond, in a bar, in a suit, either with a drink or about to order the martini. And then I see Ethan Hunt literally in the middle of a tunnel, like, literally dropping down a tunnel or something like that, in that black suit that I just said. And then oddly, I see Jason Bourne in a car in that kind of, like, gritty early 2000s bluish tone.
I see him running.
Oh, he does do that.
Running.
Yeah, he does do that a lot too. He's just always, like, in cars, or, like, he's a bit of a creep, to be honest. Like, in a lot of the, like, in the films, he's, like, always just constantly, like surveying people, because he's been surveyed as well. He's being kind of, like, hunted down, so he's also on the lookout. So where he's placed is also somewhat, like, in hidden spots, but also, like, looking at someone.
Yeah, the word that I would describe Bourne as is perceptive. I feel like wherever he goes, he's always, if he's in, like, a restaurant or something, he's always noticing how many other people are in the restaurant, what the points of exit are. Like, he's just the most kind of, like, scanning the room around him. And definitely, like, Bond does that too, but I think it's just most obvious with Bourne. They have very similar names.
Yeah. I think Bond does that, but you don't get that from, like, the camera angles. Like, you always get, like, everything's under control. Whereas, like, Jason Bourne's, like, everything's a little bit, like, paranoid. I don't know. Like, that's how I feel when I watch those movies. I'm, like, just always, like, tense because something's about to do something.
Yeah, that's a good point. And with Bond, I feel like when he's on the scene or when he's somewhere, like, things are under control. Yeah. It's fine. And I think the best scene to show this is when, kind of close to the beginning, when he's driving with Madeline, and he realizes that he's just been found out, or his location has been found out, and he's, like, cornered in this square in Italy, and there's, like, you know, dozens of people around shooting at him, all of these, like, cars and trucks, and he's just casually sitting there, like, waiting for them to finish shooting. They're, like, you know, in this extreme car chase, and he's just relaxed. He's fine because he knows that he's going to be okay. He knows his car is going to protect him. His weapons are going to protect him. Like, he's relaxed. He's cool. He's casual.
Yeah.
Bourne is not in a great mental space.
No, but that's also understandable because of all this stuff that he's gone through. So
yeah, but just, like, that scene where he's sitting in the car having a casual conversation with Madeline, and she's, like, freaking out because they're being shot at.
Yeah,
and he's like, we need to have this conversation right now, and it's like, there are machine guns all around you.
Yeah, like now, like actually, does it need to be now? No. And I do kind of feel like in that moment, I didn't feel fine. Like, I know that whenever he's on the scene, like, you feel like things are under control, everything's good.
Yeah, he's gonna get out. He'll be fine. There's an escape
But
route.
oddly, like, in that scene, I just felt like it wasn't he was giving up, but it was just, like, that panic of, like, maybe at some point those like, you know, bullets are actually going to come through. And so you started to panic. And you almost kind of feel like, oh, he's giving up because he's just like, well, I love this woman, but I don't feel like I can trust her anymore. So what's the point? And so he's given up. So then things aren't under control anymore. And so you're sitting in the same car as them just thinking, okay, the bullet's going to shoot through soon. Like, what's going to happen? I don't know.